Westworld always tries to pull the wool over our eyes with timeline jumps, simulations and secrets only revealed at the end of the season. So what are we actually seeing in Season 3? This is my first meta-theory video on what's actually going on. Hi everyone, this is Robert. Welcome to Deep Geek. I'll be covering Westworld Season 3 in full, so if you want episode breakdowns, explanations, live discussions and much more, please click the subscribe button in the bottom right of your screen and the bell icon. As Season 3 of Westworld progresses, we're slowly able to start picking out some themes the showrunners are keen for us to understand, and crucially, start to identify patterns and clues as to what's really going on. And I think there are two really important themes starting to emerge that will play into the final reveal. One of them is very familiar to Westworld fans, the idea that sometimes we aren't watching reality, but a simulation of some kind. Back in Season 2 we had scenes set in the Cradle, the Forge, the Valley Beyond and so on. This is a Westworld staple. We've grown accustomed to not everything we see being real life. In this season, most of Maeve's storyline in Episode 2 was her in that simulation of Warworld. It was her consciousness with versions of Hector and Lee Sizemore and so on in a simulated world created by Serac or Insight. In Season 2, the showrunners introduced a visual clue that we were in some kind of simulation. The aspect ratio of what we saw changed. No longer widescreen, now just normal screen, with black blocks above the top and bottom of the screen. This time, we still got that visual cue, but only after Maeve realised that she was in a simulation. As long as she didn't know, we didn't know. So, in Season 3, we can't trust that old aspect ratio cue. That will only become apparent even when the characters themselves know that they are in a simulation. But the important point to note here is that this is how Insight and Rehoboam, the massive AI supercomputer, works. Its default method for getting information or gaming out possible scenarios is to create simulations and let them run through. At that drinks party Liam Dempsey and Dolores went to, one of the guests joked about how weird it would be if they were in a simulation within a simulation created by Rehoboam. Clearly those in the know understand that this is how Rehoboam works. With Maeve, they could have kept her in the real world and interrogated her, or a million other things, but no, the default option was to put her into a simulation to try and trick her into revealing where the Valley Beyond and Delos data had been beamed. Later, Dolores, who was clearly had access to Rehoboam for a while now, I'll do a video on that at some point if you're interested, tells Caleb that this is what Rehoboam does on a macro scale. For everyone. It has data on everyone and everything, and it uses that to create a mirror world where it can play out possible futures. So Rehoboam doesn't just know how people operate, then manages their lives on that basis. It creates a massive simulation with everyone in it and runs through that multiple times to map out the future. We have effectively had confirmation that there is a mirror world out there that the showrunners could show us. But we'd know that if they had, right? Well, perhaps if we knew what to look out for, but if we don't know what we're looking for, perhaps we wouldn't know, and neither would the characters. Which brings us on to the second big theme that we've been seen playing out in Season 3. The second key theme that we've seen in this season is its focus on the capacity for humans to improve, to surprise, and to become better people, and Rehoboam's apparent inability to understand this. The key bit of evidence here is Lee Sizemore in the Maeve simulation. The thing that finally convinced Maeve that she was in a simulation was the fact that whoever had designed it, presumably Rehoboam, had fundamentally misunderstood what happened with Lee at the very end of his life. They had made the assumption, a perfectly reasonable one from the information that was available, that Lee had sacrificed himself out of a desire for Maeve. I say perfectly reasonable because Lee Sizemore was not a good person when we met him. He was arrogant, self-centered, focused on what he wanted. On the basis of that old information, of course, the only reasonable reason why he would have sacrificed himself for Maeve was because he wanted her in some way, or wanted to show off. But Maeve knew that he had done it simply because it was the right thing to do. As she said, he died a good man. He had changed. He had become a better person, and Rehoboam simply couldn't compute that. And we have other human characters in Season 3 who also show that they can become better people. Dolores admits that Caleb surprised her by being willing to die rather than give her away. And Charlotte Hale, in that message she recorded for her son when she thought she might die, also showed a human side and a contrition that we hadn't seen in her before. Faced with her own death, she wanted to be a better person. The key point here, though, is that the showrunners want us to understand in Season 3 that people can change for the better, but that Rehoboam simply does not understand this. There are probably a couple of reasons for Rehoboam's inability to understand humans' ability to change for the better. The first is that a lot of its knowledge is based on old data. Dolores explains to Caleb that its base data came from before the data protection laws, whatever they are. So Rehoboam's understanding of humans and who they are came from historical data. Then came data protection laws, and the model of understanding humanity and allocating futures to people was based initially on that old data, which was, importantly, static. Yes, it showed what people bought and did and thought, but there will have been no concept of growth or change. It's like nowadays when the adverts you are shown or the TV shows you are recommended or whatever are based on your previous choices, not on who you have the potential to become. Humanity was calcified, set in place, based on our past choices and who we were, not who we might become. The second factor playing into Rehoboam's inability to understand human growth and change is Serac's own apparent downbeat view of humanity. When talking to Maeve about human history, he doesn't try to tell her about the advances of humanity, the good things that have been achieved, the educational advances, the medical breakthroughs, or simple love for one another. There isn't a shred of a balanced view of the good and bad of humanity. No, he gives an astonishingly downbeat assessment of humanity. He says, for the most part, humanity has been a miserable little den of thugs, stumbling from one catastrophe to the next. Our history is like the ravings of a lunatic. This isn't someone who thinks that humans have an ability to change for the better. He thinks that humans need managing, or we will just get it all wrong again. There's a hint to where this might have come from in the promo for episode 4. We see what looks like some kind of thermonuclear incident. Check out that mushroom cloud, and a boy looking on. Tying this in with what we saw in the pre-season trailer when Rehoboam was mapping out the major incidents in recent human history, we see that there was indeed a thermonuclear incident in Paris in the year 2025. When Serac, who appears to be French, would have been 30 years younger or so. About the same age as that boy. Could Serac, who was the prime builder and coder of Rehoboam, have been witness to that incident when he was much younger? It seems quite likely. And could this have scarred and shaped his understanding of human history, making him want to ensure that that kind of thing never ever happened again? Again, it seems likely. So we have Rehoboam built and imbued by someone with a very low view of human history and progress that is now dominating human development or lack thereof, and who works out and manages what is going to happen through a mirror simulation of reality that is sometimes built on false assumptions. Enter Dolores and the other hosts. This is clearly something exogenous to the model that counts as a critical incidence or divergence. The word divergence, incidentally, makes a whole lot more sense when you consider it a divergence from the mirror world that Rehoboam has created and is controlling. And Rehoboam has now mapped out that in the future it is modelled, there is no future for humanity. The hosts win. Serac thought that the threat here was Maeve, but he now thinks it is Dolores. The actions of hosts are very confusing for Rehoboam because he doesn't have that base data for them. Anyway, Rehoboam's mirror world predicts humans' destruction, and Serac is now trying to recruit Maeve to stop that. So let's come back to what we are seeing. Could we be seeing not just the real world, but what is happening in this mirror world, where Rehoboam is trying to figure out what is going on? It would be quite a meta trick to play on the audience, but the showrunners have form in this. Huge chunks of Season 2, remember, we were being shown Bernard's scrambled memories. So some of what we've seen so far is real, and some is just Rehoboam's mirror world, where humans never become better people and the hosts win. But is there any evidence that this is what is happening? Well, the divergence between those two worlds, given what we know, would be seen in humans actually changing for the better. If this theory is true, what would be a massive clue is if we see the same event twice, one with a human doing as you might expect them to do, and another with them changing for the better, being a better person in some way. After episode 3, I think we have just this evidence. At the start of the episode, we see Charlotte Hale start recording her message for her son in the midst of the massacre at Westworld. She takes the time to find a host, bring them back online, and leave a message, singing him that song that he asked her to sing before she left. Host Charlotte watches the video and seems unaffected by it. She's interrupted and told she's running late and goes to pick up her son. She strangles and kills the creepy man. So far, so Predator Charlotte. But bizarrely, the very next scene we see her in, she is still in the office, and she is watching that same clip. It's just that this time the clip is longer. The message that this Charlotte, human Charlotte, has left for her son is a lot more personal, more caring. It's a different message. She says sorry and admits that she wasn't as good a mother as she could have been, that she wasn't there enough. The song she sings is their song, she says, rather than just a song. She seems, at what she must have thought was at the end of her life, to have left a genuinely caring, selfless message. She had changed at the very last minute into a better human, like Lee Sizemore did. Of course, we must be careful of editing here, but what appears to be the case is that after watching the first version of this, the version Rehoboam probably expected her to record, host Charlotte stays like normal Charlotte, a predator. After watching the second version, host Charlotte cries, visibly affected. We are seeing two versions of the same message. The first is the one we, or Rehoboam, might expect from the career-driven Charlotte Hale, but in the second, she has changed. She is contrite, she is a better person, but Rehoboam can't calculate that. The first version is Rehoboam's mirror world. The second is the real world. Season 3 is showing us both Rehoboam's mirror world and the real world. Maybe this is why we also have a discrepancy in the dating in this season. It's gone slightly under the radar for a while, but the showrunners have been incredibly detail-focused throughout all of Westworld, so when something as fundamental as which year it is set in starts to come into question, we should start to pay attention. We know that, flashbacks excluded, the events of seasons 1 and 2 take place in 2052. Maeve's initial escape attempt at the train station was on June the 15th, 2052. We know this because they showed it through a security camera and it ended up on the official webpage. But now, for Season 3, they have gone big with welcoming us to the year 2058. They've jumped 6 years. This is almost certainly not just a typo. There is a lot of attention to detail here. But if we accept that we aren't just seeing the events which follow on from the 2052 massacre and escape, we're also seeing Rehoboam's mirror world. What if Rehoboam predicted the host uprising? Serac incidentally confirmed that it had predicted that, but just got the date wrong. Could we be seeing real life in 2052 and the mirror world in 2058? Quite possibly. The butterfly effects of all this are huge. It potentially explains some of the discrepancies in Bernard's storyline, for example. At the start of episode 1, he has a raggedy beard and is doing a self-test for the 342nd time. That seems like a lot of tests for just 3 months, and it kind of fits with Rehoboam's low view of things, that he just hides away and fights when people challenge him. But later in episode 1, he has a trimmed beard that he keeps for episode 2 and looks to find ways to stop Dolores. He is a better person. Perhaps all of this is leading to William, the man in black, finally being a better person than was expected of him. We left him at rock bottom. All the data Rehoboam will have on him will suggest that he is a bad man. That's what he was in Westworld, after all. But what if he, like Lee Sizemore and Charlotte Hale, shows that humans can change for the better? What if he makes a selfless decision that changes the course of this season, completely blindsiding Rehoboam? We already know that he has at least one big decision to make, whether to help stop Serac's takeover bid for Delos. Showrunner Lisa Joy has mentioned a few times recently in connection with Season 3 that she has a very optimistic view of humanity, of our capacity to improve ourselves. This season, I predict, will be the playing out of that belief. The world is run by those who believe that we can't improve, that we are locked into whoever we were or are or were born to be, like Caleb was. But true consciousness is not just about being self-aware. It is about being able to make your own choices. It's about being able to improve and be better people. I think that is what Season 3 will ultimately tell us. But what do you think? Let me know in the comment section below. Or join me on Sundays at 5 p.m. Eastern Time for my pre-show livestream. In Deep Geek, we'll be covering Season 3 of Westworld in full. The link to my Westworld Season 3 playlist is on the left of your screen, so please click on that if you want more episode breakdowns, discussions and theory videos about this season. Or if you'd like to support In Deep Geek, or get access to some of the content I create exclusively for my patrons, please click on the link on the right of your screen. Thanks for watching. Take care, and I'll see you again soon.